Ravi, thanks so much for joining me. Everybody knows you as the Grisham of banking in India, but you've actually had a very, very successful career in the banking space. You worked with some of the biggest banks, and now you're a CEO in a very interesting space. So when people recognize you as only an author and don't look at that part of what you've done and the bulk of what you've done, what does it feel like?
Well, it feels quite good. In fact, if people call me an author and give me recognition for being an author, that's something which makes me feel very proud, because that's something which I worked really, really hard for. And as far as banking is concerned, as far as my career as a banker is concerned, there are numbers to show for it, right? You have your profitability, your business dynamics. So one derives a lot of satisfaction from what you've delivered on that side. Whereas as an author, recognition is probably the only thing which kind of keeps you going and keeps you motivated. So I'm quite happy with people calling me an author and not particularly recognizing me as a banker.
Okay, there are two pieces to your career. I'm going to start with the pre-36, where you were just a banker, because you started writing at 36.
Correct.
What were the influences? Because you had a pretty good run in the banking space even before you picked up the pen.
You mean what are the influences for me to write a book?
No, for becoming a banker.
Well, I became a banker for the wrong reasons, and I stayed a banker for the right reasons. Okay, let me elaborate a bit. When I passed out from IIM Bangalore way back in 1993, I joined Tata IBM. IBM, it was the first day of IBM in India at that point in time, and they came with a truck to the campus. They hired some 20-odd people on day one, so I joined IBM. Somewhere down the line, I figured out that technology was not the place I could have delivered. It's very important in life to have realistic expectations of what you can do and what you cannot do. So a year into my career, I figured out that probably a technology company is not the place for me, and I started looking out. In those days, banking was a very, very glamorous field. Unlike what it is today, banking used to be the option, the coveted option for all MBAs passing out from all the premier institutes. And sadly, campus placements, I did not get a bank as a placement. So I did apply to various banks, and ANZ Greenlayers Bank at that point in time happened to give me a job as a relationship manager. Salary levels in a bank were much higher than a technology company in those days. Technology companies were not giving out or doling out ESOPs the way they are doling out today. So I joined the bank as a relationship manager in Bangalore and worked with them for about 5 years. And I stayed there for the right reasons, because one, when I went back and looked at my skill sets were in relationship building, maintaining a good customer service track record, selling skills, and understanding the needs of the customer and understanding the financial product. All these are skills which are required for somebody to do well in a bank. All these are not necessary for somebody to do well in a technology company. So for me, when I worked in the bank, I found my grounding. I found that my skill sets, which I have, and the skill sets which one's required to have to work well in a bank, matched. So that's why I said I joined for the wrong reasons. I joined for the salary, for the glamour. It was the in thing to be in those days, which ideally one should not look at when taking up a career. But I did that. Okay. But when I joined a bank, I felt that was probably the place for me to be. And thankfully, in the first few years, I did well in a bank. And that, when you actually have quick wins in any organization, that creates a halo around you. And often that halo carries you through. It motivates you. It motivates people in the organization. It makes sure that people have a good impression about you. And hence, when something good comes up, they think about you as the guy to deliver. So all those things worked in my favor, and I continued in the banking industry.
Ravi, it's interesting because I think your experiences are interesting because you also now write a column in a daily on career and career advice. So, from what you had learned from your own career, what are the pieces of advice that you often give on actually finding your sweet spot? Because many people actually spend a couple of years in their workplace not realizing what it is that their skill sets or the core interests are in.
See, the biggest problem which most of the people face today, is having wrong expectations of the career in their life. They feel that if they get rid of a toxic boss, if they get a promotion and become a vice president in an organization, if they get a six-figure salary, life will change and they'll be very happy. And so the goals for attainment of happiness are incorrect. Okay, they will figure out that the moment one boss goes, somebody else will come in and he'll be exactly the same as the previous one. They figure out that they get one promotion, they want the next, and then the next, and then the next. So if those are the goals by which you drive your career, you're going to be perennially unhappy. So people need to make sure that one, they have the right expectations of what they want in life, what they want in their career. And two, I think a lot of people, when they join organizations, look at compensation and level as the only two parameters for them to shift organizations and take up a job. Nobody looks at learning. Nobody looks at what are the further opportunities this job can give me. Nobody looks at the fact that what is the value the organization can add me and what is the value I can add to the organization. You ask these questions, then you will actually make sure that the job you take up and the career you actually pursue are the right ones for you. But nobody asks these questions of themselves or even goes and does any research which probably gives them answers to these questions. My only input to people taking up their careers, for them to be happy in a job, for them to be satisfied in a job, is look for learning, don't look for designations. Look for value, don't look for compensation. And then look at your skill sets and see if you can do the job. Don't look at the fact that the organization thinks that you can do the job. You have to be comfortable, you have to be confident of your delivery. Only then you will be successful in the job. If you don't do this, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Does the education system as you know it, you've gone through the whole mill of MBA, etc., equip you for what is required at the workplace?
Not at all. In fact, that's one of the key reasons why people today are dissatisfied in their jobs. Today, about 80% of the MBAs, the moment they join an organization, they quit the organization in 6 to 8 months. Why does that happen? It can't happen year after year after year, right? It only happens because their expectations of what the job will be like, their expectations of the workplace is very different from what a workplace actually is. Tell me one organization today, one education institute today, which prepares students for dealing with relationships at workplace. And when I say relationships, I mean hostile relationships. And when you get into a job, you have good relationships, you also have hostile relationships. How do you deal with political manipulations at work? Every single organization today has political manipulations. You don't need to be political in your organization to succeed, but you need to be politically aware. You need to know if somebody is playing games with you. Which organization, which education institute, which course teaches you or prepares you to face the real work life outside?
You know, what I like about you is the dose of realism that you have, and I think it's manifested in your books also, where you say that politics is a real thing in organizations. Don't brush it away under the carpet, don't turn your face to it, understand it and deal with it. And I think that's an essence in a lot of your books also.
Absolutely.
So my question to you is that if you were to give advice to people, what are the things that they should keep in mind to be able to relate to that or deal with that?
See, it's very difficult to give one advice which helps people deal with politics or deal with workplace. The only thing which I can tell, which I can probably talk about, is the fact that, one, be true to yourself. Do things which you'll be proud of doing. You know, about a week later, 2 weeks later, maybe 6 months later, if you look back at what you did, you should not have any regrets. If you do things with that perspective in mind, you'll always do the right thing for your job. Okay? Two, when you deal with a colleague, when you deal with somebody else at workplace, always deal in a way that you feel that if you were on the other side, you would like to be dealt with. If you do that, then you will never go wrong in your career. You know, you will have some setbacks, because if you are goody-goody at your workplace, chances are somebody will walk over you. You will have some setbacks, but it's a long life. I'm a firm believer of the fact that over a period of time, life is a big leveler. You know, you might actually lose something now, but you will make up later. I've always seen people who run, or sprint in the first few years of their career, more often than not, hit a roadblock somewhere else. And often people who have enjoyed the journey till they reached that roadblock, they also reached the roadblock at the same time. So essentially, people should understand that life evens out. Just because you are ahead at one point in time in life does not mean that you'll always stay ahead. So always do the right things. Don't really look for political manipulations, but just be aware so that when somebody is playing some games with you, you're aware that something is going wrong.
Which is interesting because, a lot of people are in a tearing hurry to get to the top.
Correct.
And in that tearing hurry, they often don't have a solid enough foundation.
Correct.
You've been through the MNC banks, which are perhaps the most aggressive, in that context.
Correct.
How did you deal with it? What were the learnings for you from it?
Oh, I fell for the same trap.
Yeah.
In fact, if today I look back at my career and ask myself a question that, Ravi, if I could live back if I could rewind my career and live it all over again, whether I would live it the same way that I have lived thus far, my answer would probably be no. I would have probably been a lot slower in the initial years when I kind of ignored everything else in life and just ran about, chasing my next promotion and my next salary hike. I would probably have paused and enjoyed the journey a lot more than what I did. So,
you also in the entire banking space, as you said, which was one of the most coveted spaces to be in a very interesting time, because you saw the entire 2007, 2008, the highs, the volatility, the crisis, and the lows. Is MNC banking, which used to be one of the most blue chip places to work, still attractive for youngsters? What's the perception? Has it crunched to become a far smaller universe?
I think MNC banks, when people joined them in those days, it had a lot of glamour. They paid very high salaries, so promised great lifestyle to people, and hence there was an attraction. And even today, if you carry a business card of a foreign bank, it holds that appeal. Okay? But when you look at people working in foreign banks now, or whether people would want to go and work in foreign banks at this point in time, probably not. Okay, and the reason for that are many. One, most of the foreign banks in India have yo-yoed in their strategy. Okay, this, for example, in one of the roles that I was in, I sacked 120 people because we wanted to shut down the mortgage business in the month of March, or was it April? Okay, 60 days down the line, the CEO of the organization changed, and we were out on the streets hiring 200 people to relaunch the mortgage business. 120 people getting sacked in April, 200 people being hired in the month of May or June. Now, that's a yo-yo. Now, people, and a lot of foreign banks these days are yo-yoing on their strategy. And that's kind of made people feel a lot insecure about joining a foreign bank. Two, I think from a learning perspective, working in Indian organizations and working in smaller organizations gives you a lot more learning, a lot more leeway. And if you compare yourself at the end of 2 years, you'd end up being a far more mature and a business person in a smaller organization than you would end up being in an MNC. MNCs are just transactions. MNC foreign banks are largely transactions, no learning. You are focused in one direction, you know what your job is. Like a horse, you go in the same direction. Don't look right, don't look left. No learning. I think that's the fundamental difference between an MNC and an Indian organization.
Okay, that's your perspective, because now you are with the Shriram Group. But my question is that, in the scheme of things, one often believes, and that was the general belief, that there was a mindset difference, that the global banks were more universal, more bigger in their scope. Indian banks or Indian organizations have been a little slower in their approach. Of course, a lot has changed, and this is not a black and white space either, because you can have both extremes in both. Is there a fair assessment, or do you think, people just get it wrong?
I think foreign banks are aggressive, or were aggressive at one point in time, and it's a fact that you have a lot of knowledge transfer happening from the global banks globally. A lot of risk practices can actually come into India. But when you just step back and look at what went wrong in the 2007 to 2010 period, the same pace of growth killed you. The same risk practices which were not adapted to Indian conditions were the cause of your downfall. Whereas today, if you look at the Indian organizations, which are a lot more slower in their growth, they still make money. They still make profits. And the reason for that is Indian organizations typically make up for the slow pace of growth with a slow expense line, with a low expense line. So a low expense line supports any pace of growth. You start growing first and then put on the expense. Whereas most of the foreign banks get the growth numbers from India and get the profits from somewhere else. And that approach is to my mind very myopic.
That's interesting. At 36, you picked up the pen to write your first book, which was very interesting and created a splash in the banking sector, because it was, and I loved it because it was so, realistic and in your face, so to say. But my question to you is that what induced you to write it? Because it came with a lot of passion and feeling, I think, with a lot of real life experiences.
Actually, it was, when you look back at it, I think life is always a series of accidents. Okay, and to me, this was one nice little accident in my life. I always wanted to write. Okay, because and that's because of a very strange reason. I always wondered, will people remember me after I die? Okay, and that question kind of irritated me a lot. And if you go back and look at who was the CEO of Citibank in India 10 years back, you wouldn't know. In 2007, when I wrote my first book, if I ask you who was the CEO of say a Yes Bank, or Yes Bank, of course, who was CEO of HSBC, you won't remember. But 8 years back, when I wrote UpGrad as a banker, if I ask you today who wrote UpGrad as a banker, you would remember Ravi Subramanian. So I think somewhere down the line, people tend to remember artists. People tend to remember people who create things out of their own creativity. And I had that feeling of a vacuum, saying, will people remember me for my banking job? The answer was clearly no. And how do people remember me? So writing was what it was. And there was a time when my wife Dharni was with Citibank at that point in time, was on a management training program. So she was conducting a training program. So she was away for a month. And my daughter was 6 years old at that time. And she would go to sleep at 9:30 at night. And because she was alone at home, one couldn't go out and party or do whatever one wanted to do. So the only option was to, and how long can you watch TV, right? And the only option was to do something interesting. So I sat down and started writing a book. And I wrote the first 20 pages, showed it to some friends of mine. And I had based those characters on certain individuals, though they didn't trace their lives, but I kind of...
You got a moment of their life.
Yeah. So I then showed it to a few friends. They liked it. They said, wow, this can actually become a good book. And then I started writing. And once you get past the 30th or the 40th page, then you're already so much invested in the book that you want to see it through. And then I continued writing and I saw it through. So that's the way it happened. It was only because my wife went out for a training program, leaving my 6-year-old daughter with me for a month. And I didn't have anything else to do. And that aspiration had been there forever in my mind. And I just made use of the opportunity and started writing.
Okay. Who were your role models at that? Pre that and post that? Because, somewhere in your journey, didn't look as though you were a literary sort who had this overarching passion to write and pen verse or whatever else. It doesn't come through as that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I wanted to write only one book. Okay, I didn't want to write anything more than a book, because it was, I told you about the aspiration in my mind, saying I had to get a book out. And but success makes you greedy. So the moment the first book became very successful, it kind of put you on a track where you started thinking maybe one more, maybe two more. And then that's how the journey started. And thankfully readers have been kind to me, so my books have always done reasonably well. And the publishers kept pushing me, the readers kept pushing me. So I started writing, and over a period of time, I moved away from pure banking stories to banking thrillers. And that's how I moved into the space where I started writing about thrillers, people getting killed, investigations, etc., which were all new to me. In the sense, I have not even walked into and had a jail and had a proper conversation with a constable. And here I'm writing about murders and investigations about DCPs and ACPs and blood and hospitals and postmortem and all those things. So it's very interesting. And the other thing which happened to me was that every book of mine kind of set me on a track of learning. I loved the research which I would do behind the book. Banking was a backdrop, but banking I knew about. So researching about, for example, in one of my books I wrote about the US academia and about gun control. And for me, reading up on gun control, understanding what thoughts went behind gun control, understanding the lobbies, and also understanding the academia in the US, how it works, how it functions, was fascinating. And then when you sit down to write the entire thing as a part of a story, it's a lot fun. It's a lot more fun than you can think. Writing a book is a lot more fun than promoting a book and selling it once the book is out. The other question which you had was, who were the role models, right? For me, I had one very, very important role model, and that was MS Oberoi. Simply because from a nobody, he became the head of such a large organization. He created an institution from scratch. And for me, if he could do it with nothing going for him at a point in time, except for attitude, will, dedication, I think anybody can do it.
Well, he was entrepreneurial. He was.
But he was amazing, right? He started off as a stenographer from in Cecil in Shimla, and from there on, look at the
created an institution.
Look at the large enterprise he created. And to me, I go back to his book every now and then to read when I'm feeling a bit dull. And I think Bachi's book on Dare to Dream, I think it's called, was inspirational.
So, you call it Grisham of banking, because what Grisham did in the legal space, you're doing in banking in India. It's a new concept, because, what is also interesting is that you're part of that wave of authors who've come in from different influences and are now, riding the bestseller list. What changed according to you? Because, you would have analyzed it. What changed that brought this new wave of the so-called non-literary or non-typical literary people into the writing sphere? What do you think changed?
A couple of things. One, I think there's a story in all of us. I think if everybody here wants to sit down and write a book, they can tell a story. So, because experiences teach you, and stories are made of experiences. So, everybody had a story in them. Two, I think somewhere down the line, though not many would credit him with this, but the fact that Chetan Bhagat came up and wrote those books gave confidence to a lot of publishers that, look, there is a certain reader base which is there for reading books written by Indians for Indians. Till then, Indian authors would be either guys teaching English in the US or the diaspora based in the US. You didn't have too many Indians based in India writing books. I think that confidence translated into them accepting a lot of Indian authors into their fold. And then you had people like myself, like Amish, like Ashwin, who came in and who started promoting the books well, so that they reached out to a larger audience. And hence people started picking them up and reading that because of the buzz that they created. And I think this is what happened in the publishing industry. That said, I think what also happened was the fact that all these guys came in with a certain amount of focus, certain amount of dedication. And the fact that, look, if I have invested a year in writing a book,
I want to sell it and make it work.
I want to sell it and make it work. That was something which the industry frowned upon initially. Okay, the industry was full of literary freaks who would turn around and say, okay, I've written a book, but I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
let the media write about it. Let the media write about it.
Shy about it. Yeah.
Let the media write. I'm not going to tell you that, Mini, here is my book. Buy it, read it, or whatever. If Mini wants to read it, well, it's up to her to read it and come and tell me that, you written a fabulous book.
There's an ego involved in writing, right?
Yeah. There still is. In fact, somebody, made a publisher of a large publishing house once made a very interesting comment about the new age authors and the authors of the past. She said that, look, Ravi, she said the authors of today are guys who are very grateful to the reading audience that they bought their books, spent money on buying the books, gave them the time, and read the books and are connecting with the readers. So they're thankful to the readers. The authors of the past, and a few of them even today, come from a school of thought where they feel that writing is very personal to me. So the reader should be grateful to the author that the author allowed them to come into his or her personal space and experience what they experienced. And I think that difference in perspective is what segregates the modern day commercial fiction writer and the author of the past.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions on this because I've found it very interesting. Also because there are 2-3 aspects to this, Ravi. The first is all of you, Amnish, you, Ashwin, Chetan, all came in after having achieved success. When you wrote a book, it wasn't to earn money. It
Correct.
wasn't to get a certain lifestyle. You'd already arrived. You were all, people with careers. So there are 2 aspects. A, that it also means that our education system and our upbringing is such that your first thing you have to do is tick all the boxes, right?
Correct.
Get an MBA, get a good job,
Correct.
do well, and
Correct.
then you start dreaming and
Correct.
living your dreams.
Correct.
So has that changed, you think, or was it also a generational piece? I'm going to take the first piece first.
I think you're right. You're right in the sense that we come from a generation where you had to become an engineer or a doctor or at least a graduate before you started doing anything else. And if at 12th, after I cleared my 12th, I told my parents that, look, I want to become an author. They would have given me one whack on my cheek and said, go, now do your engineering. Now, that's changed a lot now. And that's changed a lot now also because the career options which people have are significantly large. Today, for example, one can make a career of playing kabaddi. Forget anything else. So your TV has opened up, media has opened up, your hospitals have opened up, your entertainment has opened up big time. The radio has opened up. So people have lots of options irrespective of the field that they choose. And that probably has given confidence to a lot of people that, look, even if I'm not an engineer, even if I'm not a doctor, I can still go ahead and make a successful career. And that is also being driven by people like us who have gone through a very conservative educational system, and we want our children to be different. So for me,
it's a generational thing.
It's a generational thing. Tomorrow, if my daughter wants to take up literature after 12th, I'll say, please go ahead and do what you want to do. I'm not the one going to impose my will on her and say, look, you have to do an engineering. All I will say is just be safe so that tomorrow, if fine arts doesn't work, then at least you have a backup.
Okay. So another manifestation of this is because of the marketing, the left brain sensibility that all of you bring because of your training. You've looked at the art of selling the book, marketing the book with clinical precision, which is, I think you're doing more than the publishers themselves in being able to make a business plan, have a targeted niche, have that entire universe open up. And at least that's my perception. And that's interesting because that's also a new way of looking at the business.
Many we look far better than what we are simply because the people before us did nothing on promoting the books.
Yeah.
So the base was pretty low. If you ask me whether I want to do a lot more than what I'm doing now, or Amish wants to do a lot more than what he's doing now, I'm sure all of us will say, yes, we want to do a lot more. But the commercial dynamics of the entire thing has to change. Because a publisher makes only X amount of money, so he puts only a small portion of that in marketing. Now, if the publisher starts making a lot of money, he'll spend a lot more money on marketing. So the dynamics of the book trade have to change for things to fall in place for most of the authors. But yes, you're right in the fact that we look at a lot of things with clinical precision. My book comes out in 3 months' time. I'm already started planning what I'm going to do starting now for the next 90 days till the book comes out. Now, if you go back and look at whether it used to happen in the past, no. So
do you also segment your book? Do you get reader feedback and change the plot or rework aspects?
I do.
Is it a collaborative effort in that sense?
I do, in the sense that one, I do reach out my manuscript to about 5 to 10 people whom I know, who I'm confident that they will not share the manuscript with somebody else, and basis their feedback, I change segments of my book, because eventually when it goes out in the market, I want people to understand. I want people to flip through it. I want the book to be racy all through, not in parts. So I take feedback very seriously. If I find the feedback genuine, And if I'm convinced about the feedback, I have no qualms in changing.
Really? So it's not something that you're egotistical about or something?
Not at all.
Okay.
In fact, if my editor wants to change, for example, when the book goes for editing, and the editor changes a few lines here and there, a lot of authors do get very sticky about it, saying, I wrote it right, how can you change my line? I have no qualms about it. Why?
In the group of authors that we spoke about, you're perhaps the only one who's still a banker, Ravi. So is this a conservative heart in you that says that, hey, I'm going to do what I'm trained to do and I'm not going to upset the apple cart too much? Why is it?
Two reasons. Okay. One, if I go out of banking, where will I get the stories from? Okay, so I do get a lot of stories from my book, from my career. People whom I interact with during the course of my career, I do get a lot of stories and inspiration from them. But on a more personal note, I think I write for fun. I don't write for money. The fact that I make money in writing is an added plus, but I don't depend on that money for my sustenance. My house runs on my job, on my salary. Now, so writing for me is a lot of fun. I can do whatever I want to do on writing. Okay. The day I quit my job and take up writing full time, writing will become a job for me. It'll start becoming boring. It'll start becoming routine. And then I'll be under pressure to churn out manuscript after manuscript, story after story. So in the hurry to churn out manuscript, because my next meal depends on writing, I will probably start churning out junk. And it will completely lose the fun from me. I will lose interest in writing. So for me, till the day that I can manage my job and my writing, I'll manage both. The day I cannot manage both, I will take a call at that point in time. That call could be either of the two.
Yeah, it could go either ways.
It could go either ways.
Yeah, but you've been almost frenzied in the number of books you've written. I mean, I've always felt completely tired looking at you churn out the books. I'm like, how does he do it? How do you do it? Because you're actually running a big business with a big P&L. So how do you get time to churn out the kind of books that you're doing?
See, I typically dedicate about 3 hours to 4 hours a day on writing.
Yeah, and that's rigorous every day?
Almost every day, yeah. And on weekends, it's definitely 5 to 6 hours a day. And the way it happens is, I start my day early. And I would recommend that anybody who wants to do multiple things in life, please start your day early, because it helps you get out of office pretty quickly. So because I start early at 8, I can get out of office at 5:30. And I'm home by 6. I miss traffic. I don't drive 2 hours a day to work and back, simply because when I'm driving, because I take 15 minutes to get to office, because there's no traffic at 8 o'clock in the morning, and 5:30 office traffic hasn't started back again. So it gives me a lot of free time, and I start writing at about 9:30 at night, and I go on till 12:31, depending on the flow I'm in, and that's the time I research. I go through the, Google is a great help in terms of research, in terms of what's happening across the world, and Saturdays and Sundays are normal for me, except for the 9 to 12 at night. I also write a couple of hours during the day, so it's 5 hours a day. And typically, look at it, if you break down the writing process, a book is 80,000 words. Okay, there are authors who write 60,000 words in a book. Okay, yours is much more, because yours is a much bigger book. And if you end up writing about 500 to 600 words on every day, and about 1,000 words on a weekend, just do the math. You do 2,000 and plus 2,000, 4,000 words a week. You need 20 weeks to write a book, which is 5 months to write a book. Then your editing, your refining of first draft, etc., takes another 4-5 months. So ideally, if somebody writes a book a year, it's not.
So this is clinical precision. This is like totally rigorous planning and everything. It's not. There's nothing floozy about it. I mean, in the sense, or vague about it.
It's not clinical to the extent that the day I don't feel like writing, I shut my laptop and I go off and read something and go to sleep. But by and large, when I'm writing, I'm pretty much writing. Okay. I know people who write books in a month, but that reflects on the language also as well, because then it kind of you're in a hurry to complete, and the book does not turn out that well. But I think 5 to 6 months for the first draft, and another 4-5 months for the refinement of the book is a good enough time.
So I'm going to end this conversation on 2 questions. One, having achieved success in both spaces, both in the banking space as well as as a writer, what do you think are essential building blocks for success?
I would say there are 2, 3 essential building blocks for success. I've been harping on having the right expectations. That's one. Two is having the right attitude. And I say this with a lot of caution. See, whenever you get into a situation, you always tend to blame somebody else. Okay? Whenever you're unhappy, you tend to blame somebody else. But understand, you are 50% of the problem. Okay, so 50% of the responsibility to get out of the situation is yours. The day you recognize that and do your 50%, everything else will fall in place. So having the right attitude is very critical. 3, make sure your integrity is unquestionable. I think that's a problem I have with the younger generation. And when I say integrity, it's not about corruption, it's not about money alone. It's about integrity to yourself. Be honest to yourself. Make sure that you're not cheating people. Make sure that you're doing the right things at job. Make sure that you're completely committed to what you're doing and delivering. It's often said that character is what you do, when nobody is watching. I think, to me, that's what constitutes integrity. And the last point, be focused in whatever you're doing. And often, people tend to say that do what gives you happiness, okay, you'll be successful. I would just flip it around and say, try to be happy in what you're doing. And if you do that, you will definitely be successful.
One thing that I think comes through in this conversation is also the fact that you enjoy the process of learning. And I don't know how, I feel that perhaps our education system is such that, you finish your entire education in one long sigh, you get a job, you start ticking the buckets or the boxes, and you stop growing. I mean, the fact that you became an author was because of the passion that you wanted to try something new, you wanted to open your mind.
Correct.
Do you think youngsters are doing enough of that? And what would your advice over there be?
I'm a bit positive about the learning skills of the youngsters today. The reason why I say this is because I find youngsters being very keen to know more. Youngsters are very inquisitive, and to the extent that they actually irritate you with their inquisitiveness. But I think that's a good sign for people like you. It's a good sign for a country like India, because youngsters are open to learning, a lot more open than what people of my age are, and the people that I've seen in my career thus far. I've always seen that people who are inquisitive, people who are constantly learning, people who are constantly upskilling themselves and learning new trades and new skills are the ones who do well in life. So it gives me a fair bit of confidence that the youngsters will do that today. And to me, the hallmark of a successful guy is a guy who is successful at that point in time, okay, but also builds his skill sets so that he is successful 5 years, 10 years from now. What's the big deal in building a huge retail store, shutting it down 2 years down the line, and then going bankrupt? The idea is, I need to build something for today with the skills that are required to build it, but also have the skills to transform that to the need for the future. And I think that's what is a lot more important. And learning, to my mind, is integral to a journey for any successful individual.
So UEducation is doing a lot of online stuff and looking at online as a leveler to disseminate education. What's your message on online learning and how people should use it to up their skill sets?
I think online is the way to go forward. Today, digital and online, there's no comparison. Nobody wants to spend time going to classrooms, listening to teachers who have archaic means of teaching, and then coming back and getting a degree. I think today degrees are meaningless. Degrees given by universities are completely, meaningless. What's more important is what I have learned through a particular session. And that's where I think what a digital learning platform can do is that it can bring the best of learning processes, best of learning technology to not only a student who goes to A college or B college or C college, but to everyone. So it kind of just levels the playing field for all the students. You get the best of knowledge right at your doorstep, on your laptops, on your computer screens, on your mobiles. So there's nothing better than digital learning to me. In fact, if all colleges were shut down and we opened computer labs and teaching institutes and all these places, I'd probably be the happiest.
Yeah, it's a little too early for that, but thank you so much, Ravi. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the biggest learning moments for me was actually it turned out to be a very big learning for me in hindsight. There were 2 years from 2002 to 2004 when I was working in this organization called City Financial, which is a part of Citigroup, and I was running a couple of business lines for them, and I didn't like a day of working there. Okay? It was extremely frustrating for me. I would actually drag myself to work every single day, but I did drag myself to work every single day, wondering why I'm doing this, but I still did it. And now when I look back at it, the next job that I got as head of consumer finance for City Finance for HSBC, and then my subsequent jobs, all relied on the skill sets that I acquired in my 2 years at City Financial. So to me, my career took off in HSBC only because I had those 2 years of skill set behind me. And the learning for me at that point in time was that, look, if you don't like what you're doing, if you have to go through a particular grind in your career, and you know that opportunities outside are limited, or you're not getting the right opportunity, just go through that grind. Stay focused. Make sure that once in your job you deliver, and don't get distracted by your frustrations. At some point in time, you'll figure out that experience is a lot more valuable, and you grow as an individual because of that particular experience. And two, what it taught me also was that success is not always the best teacher. Failure teaches you a lot more than success. If I had given up in those 2 years, I would have not got the career path that I got after that. I lived through those 2 years. I learned through those 2 years. I learned how to deal with people. I learned how to deal with integration of organizations, mergers and acquisitions, alliances, and those skill sets were key for my delivery in my subsequent roles. So to me, while the frustration was there, the learning really put me on a fast track on a later date. So I think you may not realize it when you're going through a grind, but when you connect the dots in the future, you realize that was for a purpose. So stay positive.
Great.